What's going on, guys? Jack Girls 8075 here. Today I'm going to be doing a sort of different video. Today I'm going to be doing the last DDR Oberliga teams. Where are they now? So I'm going to be going through the DDR Oberliga table from 1991, starting at first and then going down to the bottom of the league and going through where every team is now. And what's happened to them since that last DDR Oberliga season. Just for something a bit different on the channel. If you like this sort of content, please tell me and I'll bring more of it out. So let's jump right into the video, guys. Before we jump into talking about where the 1991 teams are now, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to the DDR Oberliga and football in East Germany. After the Second World War, football was initially banned by the Soviet occupying forces because they wanted to begin denazification, and they saw a lot of clubs as too sort of right wing and too bourgeois. So the Soviets came and they created their own clubs, and in 1946 the first Ostzonenmeisterschaft was staged, which Turbine Erfurt won. So that means Turbine Erfurt were technically the first champions of East Germany. East Germany got its formal league structure in 1949, and that is when the DDR Oberliga was created. So that was East Germany's football league from 1949 till 1991. The first champions of the DDR Oberliga were Hansa Rostock, who are now Hansa Rostock. That was Hansa Rostock's original name. Over the years, East German football was dominated by state-run clubs. Clubs run by the police, or clubs run by the secret police, the Stasi, or clubs run by state factories. So not many independent clubs did well. Independent clubs like Union Berlin didn't tend to do well because they didn't have a state factory or a state sort of functionary attached to them. So independent clubs didn't do well, and it was always the big state-run clubs like the two Dynamo clubs, or Karl Zeiss Jena, or Lokomotive Leipzig, or some of the Chemie clubs as well, that they're the ones that did well in East Germany because the government were giving them money. After the wall came down and Germany unified, the DDR Oberliga stayed on for a year, which is what we are going to be talking about. The 1991 season was the last season to be played. So football in East Germany outlasted the country by a whole year. The last DDR Oberliga season was actually called the NOVF Oberliga, the Nordost-Deutsche Fußballverband Oberliga, and that was that, with Hansa Rostock winning it, which I'll talk about later because we'll be going through the table from top to bottom. So that was just a little introduction to the DDR Oberliga. So starting off with the first champions at the top of the table, we have Hansa Rostock. Hansa Rostock won that last Oberliga title in 1991, and that was a second after, like I previously mentioned, they won the first ever one in 1949 as Hansa Rostock. So Hansa won the last league because really they'd adapted to capitalism well. They bought in some half-decent players and it got sponsors and everything like a lot of the big state-sponsored clubs hadn't done. So Hansa won that last league, and they did a League and Cup double that year as well. Winning the Oberliga meant they got qualified into the Bundesliga for the 92-93 season. And they did okay in the Bundesliga. They were just sort of like a lower half of the table club. But the more time went on, the more they struggled to compete financially, which happened to a lot of the old East German clubs, like you'll see, which meant Hansa soon dropped down the divisions. In 2020, they find themselves in the 3 Liga, just a solid mid-table club. They actually had a decent promotion push towards the end of last season, but then a few silly results meant they tossed all that away. So they're just a firmly solid, safe 3rd division outfit, and a shadow of their former selves, really. They used to be top contenders in East Germany. They now find themselves in the Dritte Liga, the 3 Liga, East Germany's 3rd tier, and I don't think we'll be seeing them in the Bundesliga again very soon. Like I said, they struggled to compete financially in the Bundesliga as time went on. That soon became the case in the Bundesliga too, and now they find themselves in the 3 Liga. The team that came second in the last DDR Oberliga season and claimed that last qualification to the Bundesliga spot were giants Dynamo Dresden. Now in that season, Dynamo Dresden were just pipped to the post to the title by Hansa Rostock. It was quite an interesting title race. But Dynamo, of course, were one of East Germany's biggest clubs and one of the most recognisable names out of East German football. They sort of became a symbol of East Germany. In that last season, like I said, they did do well, but they came second, just pipped to the title by Hansa Rostock. And that meant they got into the Bundesliga. Now, Dynamo Dresden spent a few years in the Bundesliga, but in the late 90s, financial problems began to rear their head, and Dynamo soon found themselves in the Bundesliga too, where they've spent most of their time since then with occasional relegations to the third division. In a club of this size, it's criminal, but again, this is going to be a common theme. It's because of money. Now, this season, Dynamo Dresden found themselves relegated out the Bundesliga 2, coming dead bottom, meaning they will be playing 3 Liga football next season. And this giant old club with so much history and success behind them, because being East Germany's second most successful team behind BFC Dynamo, find themselves in the third division and never really getting close to promotion. Every year they say it's going to be their year, but they always find themselves lower half of the table, Bundesliga 2. They go down into the 3 Liga, they then get promoted, and then they go through the same process again. And it's all due to finances. A lot of businessmen have screwed Dynamo Dresden over. And like I was saying, they will be playing 3 Liga football next season, which I think is criminal for a club of their size. But they came second, and that was the last Bundesliga qualification spot out of the Oberliga. And like I said, it was a pretty interesting title race, with Dynamo just being pipped to the post by Hansa Rostock. The team that came third in that last Oberliga season and gained automatic Bundesliga 2 was Rot-Weiß Erfurt. Now, Rot-Weiß Erfurt were never really that great in the Bundesliga 2. They spent a few years there before eventually getting lost in the lower divisions. For most of the time they were a third division club. They got relegated out the 3 Liga, and last year in the Regionalliga Nordost things didn't go too well for Erfurt, as they got handed a massive points deduction, which basically relegated them due to arguments with sponsors and financial irregularities that caused legal proceedings, and ended up with Erfurt being forced to be relegated to the Oberliga Süd, which is the 5th division. And they haven't started life in the Oberliga Süd too great, with the financial troubles meaning they basically have to play their second team, and they could be, I mean, it's too early to say, but they could be on the verge of an unthinkable relegation to the Verbandsliga. Now, if we're talking about right now, Erfurt are the club that have fallen from grace the most because of where they are. You know, they're dead bottom of the 5th division. Erfurt were sort of like the West Ham of East Germany. They were, you know, just sort of a club that they didn't really win much in terms of silverware, but they were a decent team, always sort of challenging. They did win a few East German cups, and like I said, their predecessors, Turbine Erfurt, did win the Ostzonen-Meisterschaft in 1946, so they do technically have an East German title to their name. But financial difficulties and financial irregularities mean Rot-Weiß Erfurt today find themselves in the 5th division and on the verge of an unthinkable relegation to the Verbandsliga Thuringia, which is Germany's 6th division. And Erfurt have sort of just become an amateur club, and they've been lost in the wilderness of lower league football ever since that last Oberliga season. The club that found themselves 4th in that last Oberliga season were Hallescher FC, at the time called Chemie Halle. So Halle came 4th that season, which was actually a good showing for them, because they used to be a sort of mid-table club in the Oberliga. Again, maybe it's because they adapted to the new system. I don't really know, but Halle found themselves 4th, which meant they automatically qualified for the Bundesliga 2. They didn't really do well. They got relegated, and they found themselves for the past 20 odd years bouncing around the sort of lower divisions. They've now sort of become a solid 3 Liga club and have settled in for the long run in the 3 Liga. This season was a season of ups and downs. At Christmas, they were top of the league and looked nailed on, promoted to get to the Bundesliga 2. They then massively bottled it, ended up in a relegation battle for the sort of closing stages of the season, and they find themselves, you know, having to play 3 Liga football again after what was such a great start to the season. Halle really weren't anything special in East Germany, and 4th was a brilliant result for them, which means they're now sort of more stable, and they're one of the most stable East German teams financially these days as well. So they find themselves, you know, just like Hansa Rostock, a solid club in the 3 Liga. The team that came 5th in the last Oberliga season was Chemnitzer FC, who had newly renamed themselves as formerly Karl-Marx-Stadt, but with reunification, the city of Karl-Marx-Stadt, to get away from communism, renamed itself to its pre-war name of Chemnitz. So Chemnitzer FC, formerly Karl-Marx-Stadt, came fifth, which again, like Halle, was actually a bit of an overachievement for them, because Karl-Marx-Stadt only ever had one DDR Oberliga title to their name. Apart from that, and that was sort of a Leicester when they did that, that was East Germany's Leicester. Apart from that, they were just a solidly mid-table club in East Germany. So they qualified for the Bundesliga 2. I think they only spent about one season there before they bounced around the lower divisions. And from their relegation out the Bundesliga 2 until now, they've been a yo-yo club between the Regionalliga Nordost and the Three Liga. They've just up and down, up and down, up and down. What happened to them was, 2 seasons back, they got promoted to the Three Liga. This season in the Three Liga, last season, they didn't do very well at all. They sort of found themselves fighting against relegation, but Lady Luck wasn't on their side. They got relegated on goal difference in the end, pipped to the post by FSV Zwickau. They got relegated on goal difference, and they've not had the best of starts in the Regionalliga Nordost this season. But ever since that last Oberliga season, Chemnitz have been a yo-yo club. They've had a lot of problem with right-wing hooliganism at the club, a lot of financial issues as well. The club gets plagued by scandal after scandal after scandal, and like I said, they've been a yo-yo club, finding themselves back in the Regionalliga Nordost after winning the thing 2 seasons ago. So, not great for Chemnitz. They always sort of, if they do stay up in the Three Liga, they always sort of stay up by the skin of their teeth. So yeah, that is where Chemnitz are now. The team that came sixth in the last Oberliga season was Karl Zeiss Jena, which was a bit of a shock for them. He used to be one of East Germany's bigger sides. They were the 4th most successful team in East Germany. So Karl Zeiss Jena were a big club, and to come sixth was a shock. They got that last Bundesliga 2 spot as well, and they sort of were okay. They've spent a few years in the Bundesliga 2, but then, like Chemnitz, the financial problems hit and they started to bounce around the lower divisions. They spent most of their time in the Three Liga, with occasional dips into the Regionalliga Nordost and even the Oberliga Süd at points. But Karl Zeiss Jena have just been a fixture in the lower divisions. Last season in the Three Liga they came dead bottom, so they got relegated to the Regionalliga Nordost again. And they've not had a great start to life in the Regionalliga Nordost at all. And I don't think they're going to get promoted this year, but Karl Zeiss Jena, big shock. And as you'll notice, the further down the table I get, a lot of the bigger old state-sponsored clubs will be here because they didn't adapt to the new capitalist system as well. So Karl Zeiss Jena have never really recovered. All their good players get hoovered up by teams from the former West Germany. You know, they're quite a good talent factory, but then the players get hoovered up, and that has led to them being a yo-yo club in the lower divisions. Like I said, they got relegated and now find themselves in the Regionalliga Nordost. Team that came 7th in that last Oberliga season were Lokomotive Leipzig, and that was a really big shock. That would be like Aberdeen coming 7th in the SPL, because Lok were, you know, East Germany's 3rd team outside. They were the best club outside the 2 Dynamo clubs, and this was a big shock. But by that point, the financial rot was beginning to sort of settle in at Lok, and this has come back to bite them. In that last season, they sort of limped their way and were lucky to get into that playoff spot. They won and managed to get themselves into the Bundesliga 2, and even spent a cameo season in the Bundesliga under a new name, VfB Leipzig. They soon got relegated. They spent 1 season in the Bundesliga, got relegated. Financial difficulties hit them. They went crashing through the divisions, even ending up in the Landsklasse, which was what the old amateur divisions were called back then. So Lok had a lot of problems. Lothar Matthäus played for them in that first season in the Landsklasse to sort of help them out. That brought in the crowds. And ever since then, Lok have been steadily improving. They found themselves a solid fixture in the Regionalliga Nordost now. They came first, but sadly lost in the playoff, missing out on their chance at 3 Liga football. But Lok have never been the club they were. And that 7th place finish in 1991, I think, is what's come back to bite them with all of this. They had that cameo Bundesliga season as VfB Leipzig. It didn't go well, and that's that. But now Lok are beginning to become a bit of a force to be reckoned with in the Regionalliga Nordost, and I reckon if they keep up their good showings, 3 Liga football could be round the corner. But they find themselves a solid 4th division outfit now. The team that came 8th in the last Oberliga season was FC Stahl Brandenburg, who, unfortunately for them, had only spent 2 seasons before, the country ceased to exist and the league ceased to exist. So Stahl Brandenburg coming 8th is actually a big achievement for them. They go into the playoff round for the Bundesliga 2. They won and spent a good few years in the Bundesliga 2 before getting relegated. And just as well, they had a lot of problems with fan violence and financial difficulties. And ever since then, they haven't been doing too well for themselves. They've reformed twice, renaming themselves twice, until eventually they settled on FC Stahl Brandenburg, and they've bounced around the regional leagues of the German lower league system. And today they find themselves in the Brandenburg Verbandsliga, which is the Brandenburg State League, which is the 6th division, and they're constantly yo-yoing from the 4th to the 5th to the 6th division, even occasionally going into the Kreisliga and the Landsklasse, which are the 7th and 8th divisions. So Stahl Brandenburg haven't exactly been having a good time of it ever since 1991, but they have created some star players. A certain Stefan Freund, who won the Champions League with Dortmund, started out at Stahl Brandenburg. So there you go. But Brandenburg, ever since that little spell in the Bundesliga 2 in the late 90s, have found themselves bouncing around the lower divisions, and they found themselves second in the Brandenburg Verbandsliga this year, which is an alright result for them, but I don't see them coming up anytime soon because they are basically an amateur club. They're part-timers, they've not really got much money coming through, so I think Stahl Brandenburg are sentenced to be a lower league amateur club for the rest of their days. Team that came 9th in that last season in 1991 was Stahl Eisenhüttenstadt. That's a mouthful, but anyway, Stahl Eisenhüttenstadt were really never a great team in East Germany. They were lucky to have a top flight status. By that point, I think 9th was flattering on them given how they played in that last season. If you find footage of them playing, which I tell you is bloody rare, and the stuff I do for this channel, but anyway, they were not a great team. Eisenhüttenstadt were, they won the East German 2nd division a few times, and that was really that. Coming 9th meant they were admitted into the amateur leagues from the start, and that's where they've stayed. I don't think they've ever really come above the 5th division. And they've also went bust and reformed about half a dozen times as well. I'm not really too sure what league they're in today, because when you search Stahl Eisenhüttenstadt, it only brings up their volleyball team. I don't know if the football team still exists. I've found a picture of what might be them, which you'll see during the commentary. But Eisenhüttenstadt came 9th in that season. There's not much known about them apart from that. They were just a 2nd division team in East Germany that were lucky to have their top flight status. At that time, they were just a bang average team. And like I said, I don't know much about them because it's bloody impossible to find information on them. But yeah, the team that came 9th that season, Stahl Eisenhüttenstadt. So the team that came 10th in that last Oberliga season was Erste FC Magdeburg. I know it's the RTG team. That was a really poor result for them coming 10th, given they were East Germany's sort of 5th biggest club. So, as East Germany's 5th biggest club and East Germany's only European champions, coming 10th was a bit of a shock for the men in blue and white. And it's, like I said, probably because they struggled to adapt to football under capitalism. But yeah, they were not great that season. They came 10th, they'd already sold half of their good players, and for a club of their size to come 10th wasn't great, which means from the start they were at a disadvantage because you were 10th, that was it, you were put into the lower league. So Magdeburg have had to work their way up to get to the point where they are now. I've got to say, the position they were in the 90s compared to the position they were in now, they're a considerably better team now. They spent a lot of their time in the 6th, 5th, 4th divisions of German football before eventually they reached the promised land of the 3 Liga, and they even had a cameo season in the Bundesliga 2 3 years ago. So that's great for Magdeburg to get to that point. They're now just a solid mid-table outfit in the 3 Liga. Money problems have had their way, but I think they're beginning to look a more financially stable club, and Magdeburg found themselves just surviving this year in the 3 Liga, but I still think they're a solid team. They just survived in the 3 Liga this season, but I think next season, they'll do well. This one's got a bit of a personal, because as you guys know, this is who we're doing the RTG on, so they came 10th. I thought they'd come higher, but actually when I looked into it, they came 10th. So, bit of a shock, but now they find themselves a third division club. And I think that's where they should be, really, in terms of finances. The team that came 11th in this last Oberliga season, and this was a big shock, was BFC Dynamo. They'd renamed themselves FC Berlin by this point, but we'll keep the BFC Dynamo name. This was a big shock. The record East German champions coming 11th and being sentenced to amateur football. So BFC Dynamo, I'm sure most people know the story. They won 10 East German titles in a row. They were record East German champions because the head of the Stasi, East Germany's feared secret police, was also the club president. So you can maybe see why they won 10 East German titles in a row. Once Germany reunified and the Stasi weren't in charge of the club, they just fell away and came 11th, and that was the biggest shock of the season. They came 11th, they fell away, and without Eli Schmelke and his band of merry men propping them up, BFC struggled, and they've struggled ever since. They've been a constant lower league club. They've yo-yoed around the lower divisions, and now they find themselves a bang average side in the Regionalliga Nordost. A shadow of their former selves. They have problems with hooliganism, racism, and yeah, you're just your bang average non-league club now, and well, more than a shadow of the former club. You wouldn't even tell the BFC Dynamo now was the same club as the BFC Dynamo back then, because they were a hugely successful team back in the East German period. But you know, without the backing of the Stasi, they fell away, and now they find themselves a mid-table club in the Regionalliga Nordost. So the team that came 12th in this last DDR Oberliga season were Chemie Leipzig, at the time called Saxon Leipzig, as they'd reformed to sort of move away from communism. So Chemie Leipzig in the 60s were a massive club in East Germany, but ever since then they'd sort of went downhill a bit, and when it reached the last DDR Oberliga season, they had been consistently a lower half the table club, and they'd even been relegated a few times in the 80s as well. So coming 12th meant, like BFC Dynamo, they immediately got chucked into the lower leagues, which was a big shock for a club of Chemie Leipzig's size, and they've struggled. They've went bust a few times, and they've spent most of the time in the 5th and 6th division, although they did get promoted to the Regionalliga Nordost, stayed up, and last season confidently, and this season they've had a fantastic start, going unbeaten so far. So Chemie Leipzig look like sometime in the future they could maybe be a 3-liga club, but coming 12th in that last Oberliga season was a big shock, considering the size of Chemie as a club. Of course, they're the second biggest club in Leipzig. You know, they're still in the shadow of Lok, but during the 60s they were a massively successful club. But of course, after East Germany collapsed, they found themselves in a bit of a financial situation, and they've just been a consistently lower league club. But they're looking good this year. The finances have stabilised a bit, so we'll just have to see. So the team that came second from bottom, 13th, who would have been relegated if it had been a normal season in this last Oberliga season, were Energie Cottbus. Now, you think, well, that would have screwed them over. They would have went on to go on to lower league football. No, Energie Cottbus actually worked their way up the leagues and spent 2 seasons in the Bundesliga in the mid-2000s. And they're one of only 4 former East German teams to play in the Bundesliga, which is surprising given they came second from bottom in the last Oberliga season in 1991. Now, that Bundesliga period didn't last long, and Energie Cottbus crashed their way down the leagues till they eventually hit the 4th division, the Regionalliga Nordost. They got promoted out of that into 3-liga, only to be relegated again, and now Energie Cottbus find themselves in the Regionalliga Nordost, and they're always up there challenging. They've had a shocking start to the season this season, and find themselves at the time of recording second from bottom. So not too great for Energie Cottbus, but they had been in the Bundesliga, which is a shock given they came second from bottom in that last season in the Oberliga. And yeah, Chemie have just been one of these sides that in East Germany they weren't very successful, but in United Germany they adapted, and for a little while at least did sort of put in consistent Bundesliga 2 performances. But now they find themselves a lower league club due to finances, and could be on the verge of an unthinkable relegation to the 5th division. So they're going much the way of Rot-Weiß Erfurt. But let's hope they don't, because Energie, great old club. And And there we go. But a bit of a shock. They managed to get Bundesliga football a bit, given the fact that they were in the relegation zone if it had been a normal season. Team that had the unfortunate accolade of finishing last in the last ever DDR Oberliga was Viktoria Frankfurt, formerly Vorwärts Frankfurt. So they had been the team of the East German army before the wall came down. After the wall came down, of course, they didn't get any funding from the army, which is probably why they finished last, and became Viktoria Frankfurt so they could keep their V logo there. Now, Viktoria Frankfurt don't actually exist anymore, and I was struggling to find stuff on the team now. I found some pictures of their fans a few years ago and everything that I'll put in whilst explaining to you what's happened to them, but I don't know much about them. All I can tell you is they're now in the Brandenburg Verbandsliga, which is the last I know of. There's not really much up-to-date information. The last we know of, they're in the Brandenburg Verbandsliga, which is the 6th division, and they were the team of the army. They were never overly successful in East Germany, given that the two Dynamo clubs, which are the police, always seem to be better, but they were the club of the army because there was a lot of army bases there near the Polish border. So, Frankfurt and Viktoria Frankfurt came bottom of the last East German league, which means they ended up getting admitted into the amateur league system and into oblivion, given that I can't find much on them apart from the last we knew they were in the Brandenburg Verbandsliga. So that was that for them. They came last and they paid the price. If they tried better, it might not happen, but that's where they are now. And that is it. That's us done. I'll go and cut to the outro now. So that is that, guys. That is my video about the last DDR Oberliga teams. Where are they now? So first of all, I know it wasn't the most graphically visual video, if you sort of get what I mean there. But, I tried my best to sort of spruce it up with wallpapers and everything of the team's badges. But for some teams, it was hard to find decent pictures. You've got to bear in mind, clubs like Stahl Brandenburg and Eisenhüttenstadt and Viktoria Frankfurt aren't exactly big, well-supported clubs anymore, so it's hard to get information on them. So I want to get that apology out the way. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have made it to the end and I didn't bore you to tears, just thought it'd be something a bit different and a bit interesting for you guys on the channel. So if you're enjoying this sort of content, please leave a like, because this one, graphic-wise, wasn't too hard, but research-wise was impossible. I mean, trying to research about Stahl Eisenhüttenstadt nearly gave me an aneurysm. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you maybe learnt a bit about East German football as well. Just thought it'd be an interesting prospect. If you want other videos like first Scottish Division 1 teams, where are they now, or 5 players you didn't know played for Hibs or whatever, I'll do those sorts of videos when and if I can. Obviously I've got college coming up, so if you guys like this sort of video, leave a like and put down in the comments if you want to see more content like this. And that brings me on nicely to what I was going to say. Please leave a like if you like the video. If you're dropping by for the first time, please subscribe. And I'd like to give a few shout outs before I would like to go. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my friends who help me out with my YouTube, show support every time I put a video out. They're liking, they're telling me what I can improve on, they're helping me out, and it means a lot because YouTube helps me a lot with my mental health. Making these YouTube videos really does occupy me, and it makes me feel a lot happier. It makes me feel relaxed because I'm talking about something I'm interested in, and it helps my mental health out a lot. The other thing I'd like to shout out, and will link in the description as well, is at Gangvids over on Instagram. Class editing account. My mate runs it, puts out great edits, so please go and follow him. He wants to get to 2k, so please go and follow Gangvids. I'll link in the description. And also shout out Come On Football, great guy, go and watch some of his videos. Apart from that, guys, remember to like, subscribe, and I will see you all later. Jack out.